So that's true for Theravada. This is the Theravada view, but in Mahayana it's also goes beyond that, and it's complete Buddhahood. So then that begs the question, what is a Buddha? Well, a Buddha is a being who does nothing and wants nothing except to bring enlightenment to other beings. That's all that a Buddha does. So a Buddha has no personal volition. A Buddha doesn't think, well, I could go over there and do that. Or I could go over there and do something else. What do I want to do? Well, I don't know, maybe I'll take the day off. Buddhas don't have this kind of internal dialogue. They see need and they go. That's all they do. In fact, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, their helpers, are constantly reaching out to us. They're constantly trying to reach out to us by teaching the Dharma. They're constantly reaching out to us saying, don't go that way. That's the path to suffering. Come this way. This is the way out of suffering. But they cannot, they're not magical beings that can miraculously take away our ignorance. If they could, then out of their great compassion, they would have done that a long time ago and just given us enlightenment. But we have to do the work ourselves. So they're reaching out to us. The way that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas benefit us is by teaching the Dharma. So they're constantly reaching out to us, but we have to reach back. And we do this by learning the Dharma and working to put it into practice. So at the end of the day, we have to do the work. So this is what nirvana is. Nirvana, in the Mahayana context, is becoming a Buddha. Okay. And so these 3 or 4 Dharma seals, one way in which these are used is in looking at a Dharma teaching and saying, well, is this an authentic Dharma teaching? Does it talk about impermanence? Does it talk about suffering? Does it talk about non-self? Does it talk about nirvana? Then this is an authentic Dharma teaching. If there's a Dharma teaching that says, or something that claims to be a Buddhist teaching that says, there is no nirvana, God created everything, and our goal is to be permanently reborn in heaven. That's not an authentic Dharma teaching. Okay, so this is one way that we can filter Dharma teachings and see. So then we go on to the next one, and there are different translations for this. Right thought is the first one that I saw. This is how I learned this list when I was younger, right thought. But right resolve and right intention are also used. I like resolve and intention, rather than right thought. Because right thought just makes it sound like the thoughts that go through your head, and that's certainly part of it. If we catch ourselves thinking hateful, angry, jealous, greedy thoughts, well, we want to stop that and remind ourselves this isn't the path out of suffering. Indulging these kinds of thoughts aren't the path out of suffering. But resolve and intention are good. So the way we define this specifically is, first of all, harmlessness. And here we're talking about nonviolence. And nonviolence, not just physical violence, but kind of an emotional or mental violence as well. And having goodwill towards beings. So it's the resolve to cultivate this kind of mind. This mind of harmlessness. So it's also the resolve to cultivate renunciation. I talked about that last week a little bit too. Renunciation is seeing the causes of suffering, seeing my own ignorance and attachment and turning away from that. So when I feel that attachment to something, I stop and I say, this is not the path out of suffering. I'm going to turn my back on that. So that's this resolve to turn away from our ignorance, from our attachment and aversion. And then this next one is called seclusion from pleasures. So this has to do with the resolve to avoid indulging our attachments. So it's related to renunciation. And this is related to harmlessness. Seclusion from pleasures and renunciation are related to harmlessness because we cause harm when our attachment and aversion are challenged. This is the connection here. If you think about it, every time that we do something wrong, it's because we think we're going to get what we want, right? Or when our ability to get what we want, or keep what we have, or avoid what we don't want is challenged or threatened in some way. That's when we get mad at people. That's when we lash out and act in a harmful way. So this is the connection with harmlessness. And so this is right thought, resolve, or intention. And then right speech. This one's a little bit easier. Avoiding divisive speech. Divisive speech means, we can think of it a lot like gossip. That's one way of looking at it. It's any speech that is designed to create conflict. So if I go to you and I say, you know, Kwang Yun, she said this about you and she said that, and you know, I'm trying to convince you that you shouldn't like her. I'm trying to get you on my side and my opinion with her. Right? This is divisive speech. Happens a lot, doesn't it? Not with you, personally, right? Just in general. Yeah. Yeah. And then there's avoiding harmful speech. Harmful speech would be, I think bullying would be an example of harmful speech. But also any kind of speech in which we're encouraging others to go after suffering. Come on, you should come out with me. You should come out with me. We're going to go get drunk, and then we're going to race around in our cars, and et cetera, et cetera. This would be another kind of harmful speech. So encouraging people to create negative karma, but also just being mean and bullying. We can think of this all as harmful speech. And then idle speech. Idle speech would be sitting around, laughing about cartoons or whatever, just, you know, nonsense talk, wasting time through speech. I fail at this one on a regular basis. But that's idle speech. So we should at least try to cut down on our idle speech and have our speech revolve more around undoing ignorance and the causes of suffering. And then lying. This one's pretty obvious too. What happens when somebody lies? Often the lie grows. Then you have to remember your lie. But you told this lie to this person, another lie to that person, and you have to keep them straight. And then if people find out that you've lied, well then your reputation is damaged and they feel disappointed, so then they suffer. Maybe they had a good opinion of you and then they don't. So this is all the suffering that comes with lying. Now, specifically for monks and nuns, we have a vow against lying, and of course it's in the 5 precepts for lay people too. Specifically for monks and nuns, we're not supposed to lie about spiritual attainment. So if I sat here and I said, well, I am so enlightened, and so you should all bow to me, and then you should all sign over your bank accounts and your houses and give me all your cars and things, because I am so incredibly enlightened. I just destroyed that vow for myself. So there are some different meanings for this, you know, not lying in different contexts. But we can think of this as just in general. Any kind of lies, probably not a good idea. Now, of course, sometimes there are lies that people tell to avoid suffering. Like back in college, obviously long before I became a monk, I had a girlfriend who got a really, really, really terrible perm. And she opened the door, and I was like, hi. And she said, what do you think? Do you like it? I said, yeah, it's really nice. So I think there are contexts, obviously, in which maybe withholding the truth a little bit is perhaps the most compassionate thing to do. We just need to use our own wisdom to determine when. But there is some debate about this. I remember when I was a layperson, exploring different kinds of Japanese Buddhism, apparently there was even some debate in centuries past in Japan. If an axe murderer comes to your door and says, is your father home? I'm here to kill him. Well, if you say, yes, he's home, he's right upstairs, you just contributed to your father getting murdered, right? But you've told the truth. But on the other hand, if you lie and say, no, I'm sorry, you have the wrong address, well, then you've just broken the precept against lying, some people said. So it was like a no-win situation. Obviously, if we ever think we're in a position where two precepts are in conflict with one another, then we need to determine what is the course of action that will cause the least suffering for everyone involved. That's how we go about these kinds of problems. This is how we go about resolving these kinds of problems. Okay, so now this brings us to right action. So in right action, we're specifically talking about avoiding killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. But any kind of general action we can put under right action. So in killing, we can't completely avoid killing. If you eat meat, you participate in killing. Well, if you eat anything, you participate in killing. There's no way around it. There are some people who are vegetarian and they say, well, I'm vegetarian because I want to avoid killing. But then they're just eating more plants and vegetables and grains and things to make up for the food that they're not getting through not eating meat, right? But then we spray pesticides all over those grains and plants, and that kills all kinds of sentient beings. Plowing the fields to plant grain and vegetables, that kills all kinds of sentient beings. Harvesting them, cutting all those plants, kills all kinds of sentient beings. There's no way around killing. Every time you take a step, you're killing sentient beings. So here, avoiding killing means avoiding purposeful killing, in particular purposeful killing, particularly killing out of anger and hatred and jealousy and so on. I would also talk about lazy killing. So if there are mosquitoes around and you're thinking, well, I could close the window or I could put on some mosquito repellent, but it's just so much easier to keep, slapping them and killing them. That would also not be right under this avoiding killing. We're not really doing it out of anger or anything. We're just doing it out of laziness. So we should avoid killing, and we should also avoid stealing. Not just material things, but we should also avoid stealing time and opportunities from others. So at work, lying to undermine your coworker's chance for advancement so that you can get that promotion, that would also be a kind of theft. So we should think about it in these broader terms. And then finally, there's avoiding sexual misconduct. So this would be avoiding promiscuity, avoiding sexual activity with someone who's too young, avoiding sexual activity with someone else's partner or boyfriend or husband or wife or whatever. This would all be sexual misconduct. Now there's a traditional text that comes from an Indian monk named Atisha, and he went into much more detail than the Buddha ever did. And then he was talking about where you have sex and the time of day and these kind of other much more specific things as part of sexual misconduct, what constituted sexual misconduct. I think some of these things change with culture. I mean, for example, what constitutes someone who's too young in modern America? Well, if you went 200 years ago, 15, 16 years old was a normal age to get married. Now it's considered strange in our culture, right? So some of these things change a little bit with culture and time. But again, we can use our own wisdom. So not causing harm through sexual activity. This would be a good way, a good general way to think of it. Harm for ourselves harm for ourselves and harm for others. This would be a good general way to think about avoiding sexual misconduct. Okay. And since this is a rather long topic, I am going to stop here today and ask if you have any questions about this or anything else you've been thinking of lately related to the Dharma.